Hey there, everyone. We're just gonna wait for a few minutes while people come on in. But while we're waiting, we're gonna introduce ourselves. Thanks for joining us on Zoom today. For office hours, we're talking about mastering components, and who better than the master himself, Joey Banks, which it
Not
also happens
self-proclaimed.
to, yeah, I've titled him that. Joey Banks, it's also his 1 year anniversary at Figma, or his Figmaversary. So Joey, to start this off, can you tell us what you do and then tell us your favorite color?
Oh, yes. Thanks, fam. Thanks for saying that. Yeah, so I'm a design advocate at Figma, just like Rogie. I'm definitely not as talented, but I try to be. Before Figma, I was kind of still am, I guess, but I grew up as a product designer. That's how I got my career started. I used to work in healthcare, and I was doing a lot of work around like physician and clinical dashboards for patients, which I really loved. And I got started with Figma back in 2016 or so. It turns out my boss then actually knew our head of product from back in the day at Macro Media, and we just got an intro and honestly kind of kicked off the beta a long time ago and really fell in love with it. So like Roger said, I've been at Figma for a year now. I think it's an amazing tool. It's so fun to be able to bring into new people, into new teams, and to, I don't know, just to get to connect with people. Like, it's amazing that hanging out with you, Roger, and hanging out with everyone right now is like a part of the job. So pretty happy. My favorite color, I grew up with it being blue. I just thought, I don't know, I love blue. And actually, as I mature and as I get older, it's green. It's like a dark forest green now.
Oh wow, you're full coming into dad mode with that
Yeah.
forest green. Are you
Yep.
going to be getting like a Subaru as well, like a forest green Subaru?
I don't know. I feel like it happened as soon as I got the New Balances, the white New Balances, and they have like the new grass stains on them. You joke, but my goal is to own a house and to mow a lawn on a Saturday.
It's honestly breathtaking, and it's so much better than they all say it is. As a house owner that mows his lawn, it's
Yes.
amazing. It's amazing.
Just can't wait to wave to the neighbors. Uh, but yeah,
All
I'm
right.
excited for today.
I'm excited for today too. I'm especially excited because uh, this is something like I love building components. I know that Joey really does too. In fact, Joey's got an account on the Figma community where he actually is one of the top dogs because of all of his contributions, design systems, component libraries, and things like that. So I thought, who better to talk about this than the component? Joey titled it himself. He said he was the master. So I
It's the
have to
only
use
thing I
that
have
title.
going for me right now.
Uh, Overlord. I think we're preferring component Overlord. Uh,
We haven't run that by our PR team yet.
we have not yet. We have not yet. Uh, all right. So as usual, what we're going to do with office hours is we're going to jump in and just start showing you techniques for creating components, reusable components, different ways that we think about it, tips and tricks that we have. But we're going to do our very best to keep an eye on the questions as you raise hands or put questions into the chat. Go ahead and do that. Also remember that on that chat area where it says all panelists, you can definitely chat to us. But if you drop that down and go to all panelists and attendees, you can actually talk to everyone. So we could be a big, happy design family if you'd like to do that. All right, Joey, you think I should start or do you want to start? What are you feeling?
I'd be happy to kick it off just talking about components and maybe how to create them and their use and how to get started for those who might be really new to it. And then, yeah, like Roger said, we're kind of going to go from really basic to hopefully more complex, and hopefully you'll walk away today with, I don't know, have a little bit of fun with us, take your mind off things, and hopefully learn a little bit about components. So I can definitely kick it off a little bit.
Go for it, Joey. Go ahead and hit that share.
All right, sweet. I'm gonna go ahead and continue, and let's go ahead and share this. All right, all good, Raji?
Oh, it's beautiful.
Yes, cool. All right, great. Components. So maybe it might be interesting, like in the chat, like, do you use components? I'd be really curious to know, like, for people who are joining us today, like maybe 1 through 5, like how, maybe 1 is like really novice, 5, like I'm a total expert, I'm gonna help Raji and Joey with the stream today. Do you use components? Do you have a team library? Do you use them locally in a file? Just kind of curious. We got some 1s. All right, we've got a hardcore component user. Sweet. Ozra said she's a 5. Great. Cool. So, all right, let's let's talk about it. So
Maybe
the basics
will actually demonstrate building a component later on the stream.
Coming in here to know that I want you to know I hear you.
Of course. All right.
This is a fun one. All right, so components. They are awesome because they allow you to create an element, to really perfect that element, and then just to do it once, and you get to duplicate it everywhere. And not only do you get to duplicate it everywhere and keep consistency and make your design process much more simpler and quicker, but you also can share it with your team. Like if you're working in a file and perhaps there's like a new icon that you drew or something that you feel everyone else can use, you can make it a component, you can share it out really easily. And I think they're just so fun because like you have, let's say you have 100 instances of something, you update it once, all of those 100 instances are also updated. And I just think I think it's pretty, I don't know, I just nerd out about it a lot. So I would love to show a little bit about like how to create a component. We're gonna get into some naming conventions. I saw, I think Jordan, you just posted that in there. Definitely get into that, and we'll have some fun with auto layout. Rogie has a lot of tricks. He knows way more than me, it seems like, about auto layout. So hopefully both of us can combine to show some stuff. So first things first, I just wanna, let's zoom in over here to kind of component basics. So what we've got, we have a kind of a structure button up here at the top. We've got a couple down here that we're gonna work with. But the first thing that I wanna show is to create a component. Let's actually get into that. So all you have to do to create a component is select all of the items that you wanna be a part of that component. And then all you have to do is right click, choose create component, or for you keyboard shortcut folks out there, Option Command K. Makes it really easy. And I'll click create component. And you now have a component that's ready to be used. And you'll notice that over in the left-hand side in the layers panel, whenever you see a little 4-diamond icon, that means that's the primary component, that's the parent. That's the original component you're starting with. If I duplicate this component, so let's say I hold the Option key and drag this out here, I now have what we call an instance in Figma. And all that means is if I create, or if I make a change in the original primary component, like let's say I change this to be, I don't know, like a weird, terrible green, then that's going to be reflected in the instance. So that's kind of how that relationship works. We'll get into overrides in just a moment, but you can do a lot of overrides on instances too. So if you have like a basic component, all of your designers can actually use that. They can change the color, they can change the text, they can do all sorts of things, the size, position, all of that. So at Figma, we try to make components as like structured, but also as malleable, just to make sure that they're really usable for the entire team and you don't have to break them. So with that, let me undo that change. And what do you think would be good to walk through first, Rogie? Like I can walk through maybe overrides and how that would work, or we can walk through composing components of other components.
Yeah, what I love, and I think I learned this from you, I love just your approach to, let's just create up some buttons and let's do like a primary button, a secondary button, maybe a disabled button, and utilizing and showing how you can use a base structure to build those up.
All right, sweet, I love that. So what I typically do, and this can be different for everyone, but what I like to do is, if it's okay, I'm actually just going to use this original structures button. And for now, I'm just gonna drag the original primary component up here at the top. And what I like to do is I like to work with the structural thing that has everything inside that I might need. So when we talk about a button, we have a rectangle layer, we have a text layer, and we might have an icon, right? It's got everything in there that we could actually use for our kind of future button states, if you will. So what I like to do is I like to grab a structural component, hold the Option key or Command D to duplicate. Now I've got an instance of that original primary component. And this is actually really cool. So when you have an instance, you can right click and you can actually make a new component of the instance. And it's not going to change its looks to start off, but what you will notice is if you go to the layers panel over here, we see that new component that's been created with an instance inside. And what this allows you to do is I can actually now rename this. So maybe I'll call this one button slash, let's do primary. And on this primary button, let's say their brand color is, actually, let's say our brand color is this. For now, I'm actually just going to use one of the styles that we created. So let's say it's our primary blue over here. So
I
this
thought
is
you
now
only
our,
like green now though, Joey. Like
I'm just trying to, I don't know, accompany everyone here, you know. I'm trying to put my personal preferences aside. I like that question. Let's get into it. So now I've got a primary button. And what's cool about this is I'm just going to do it one more time. So I'm going to duplicate our original primary component up here. Going to do the same thing. Going to right click, choose create component down here. And again, I'm going to rename this to be button slash, let's imagine that we're working on our secondary button. And let's say that our secondary button, we actually wanted to have a, let's do like a white fill. And for our text, we're actually just going to make that black, or actually we could, what might work better is doing our blue for that text there. So just to separate these a little bit more and to kind of cover again, we have a structure button, we have a primary button that was composed of that structure button, we have a secondary button that again was composed with that structure button. And now what's really cool is I can duplicate this, I can make a copy so I have an instance of the secondary button, and if I want, I can change the text. Like I could say hello, and I could grab this button, and then everyone might know, but just in case, you can always instance swap these using the instance swap menu over here on the right-hand side. So what this allows you to do is that with that secondary button selected, I could change this from primary or from secondary and bump it back to primary. And you might notice if I do this a couple of times, the override that we made, so we changed that text, is totally preserved. So it allows you to kind of switch states, and you can really easily, like if you're working with an area and you have a secondary button, you're like, oh, I actually need a primary button in this use case, or I actually need a secondary button. I don't have to duplicate my efforts. I just did that once. Using that naming convention, I was able to swap it, and it's all kind of preserved there. So one thing I actually noticed is if I'll just make this short, like I'll say, hi, I noticed that our text isn't aligned properly here. So as we kind of move this button, as we scale it, it looks like our background isn't resizing and our text is staying to the left and to the top. So I want to fix this. And this is kind of where making that structure button really comes in handy, or that structure top level element where everything is composed of from. The reason is because I want to fix this, but I don't want to have to fix it for all of my different instances below, right? That'd be a lot of work. So if I want, because everything was composed of this this original primary component up here, all I have to do is select that background layer. And now I can actually change the constraints just once. So I'll shift click to make it left and right, and then shift click to make it position top and bottom, or constrained at the top and bottom. And you can see that's reflected down here in the secondary because it was composed of that structure. And for the text, we're actually going to do the same thing. So I'll click on the text here. It looks like it's positioned top and left, or constrained to the top and left. But for now, I actually just want to center it, and I want to center it here. And now let's actually go ahead and select this and center it to the middle. And now I've got this totally fixed. And again, I could select this. I could change this from secondary to a primary, and I've got my kind of different states of buttons. So there's all sorts of ways to do this. Again, some folks like to not use the structure element and just make those changes as you go. I just like to try to be efficient where I can. And if I can just make a change once, it's going to be reflected everywhere. So even for instance, if I select that rectangle layer here, I go to our corner radius tool up here, and maybe I'll change this from 8 to 100. Well, it's going to be reflected everywhere because we're just doing it once. And this is kind of I know I'm going on a little bit long about this, but this is just the thing that makes Figma so special to me, is the ability to compose components of other components and to make you faster and more productive in your work. And it's just something that I really love, if you can't tell. Rogie, do you use this method? Did you use this method before kind of like coming to Figma?
I had kind of dabbled with it, but I think when I started the design system for Dribbble, I didn't know about that. And I actually really didn't even know about nested components, because that's essentially what you're doing. And so later on, as I progressed the design system, it all used kind of structural based elements, but I think our main button one just stayed the way that it was. So yeah, I kind of figured it out.
Yeah, I feel like once you get it, it's like, oh, how could I ever go back to like doing all of these like efforts every single time?
Yeah.
So I was just catching up on chat a little bit, and I want to go back and cover a couple of things just to, I know it can be a little easy to kind of fly through this, and I just want to make sure that a couple of the keyboard shortcuts that I was using, everyone picked up on. So there were two things that I did. The first one is if I click into this layer here, actually, let's do the background layer. When I click the background layer, it was originally like this, where it was positioned or constrained to the top and to the left. If I just click on either side, I can't actually select both by doing that. So what I can do is I can actually hold Shift and then click on the other side and then click on the bottom. And that's going to allow me to select all of those at once. If I didn't want to hold shift, or if I wanted to use the menu over here, I could always select left and right and top and bottom from the menu, but shift is just a quick little shortcut to allow you to do that. The other thing, and this is something that I think the only thing that I've ever taught Rogie a couple weeks ago, was the ability to actually control right click when you're working with really any element on the canvas. So let's say I wanted to really quickly kind of drill in and I wanted to select this structure text layer. All I have to do is control right click, and you can actually see really quickly all of the layers that are underneath your click. And I can quickly just select structure and I've got it. This is an example where just command clicking would be really easy, but if you have really, really complex components, like even if I go down here and I control right click, you can see, I can see kind of a breakdown of everything that's going on. And that's just one of those things I wanted to share.
I absolutely love that little tip, which I learned like last week, years ago. Like I just learned it from you. I love it. I think it's especially helpful when that tree structure gets a little bit unruly on the left side in your layers. It's really hard to kind of drill down and navigate through that. And I like working visually. My layers panel is a mess. And I always kind of work right in that editor right in front of me. So great tip.
So the next thing that I want to get into, and I find this to be so helpful, whether it's a button or it's a container or it's like a really complex component, and it is the idea of resetting an instance. So you might know this, and you might not, but there's a couple of things that I want to share. So broadly speaking, if I have an instance down here, so just to show, this is our primary button. We've resized it. We changed the text inside. So we've kind of made some modifications. If I ever want to get this back to the original, or what's in that original primary component, all I have to do is right click on the entire instance, and I can choose reset instance from the menu option here. What this will do is it'll take me back to exactly what is matching in that original primary component. The thing that most don't know, or at least it took me a while to kind of get the hang of, is let's say you just want to actually reset the text here. Like you're good with the size, you want to keep the size, but you just want to reset what that text was. Well, you can actually select that text layer. And again, I can even control right click. I can choose our hello everyone text, and I can actually right click on this and reset that instance to reset that back to what we had in the original primary component. So this is something that I find to be really useful because we're often making lots of changes to components, but perhaps you want to reset, maybe it's like a text field or an avatar or the actual kind of image or whatever it might be. You can do all of those and always just get back without having to reset the entire thing. Likewise too, if you want, you can always select the component itself. I could select in, and I have this little reset menu over here, which is going to allow me to basically select a layer and then reset any of the overrides that were applied. So in this case, if I just want to reset the name, I can totally do that. And that name is just referring to the layer list over here. Or if I want to reset the text, I can also do that from that menu there. So if you have a component and you're making tons of overrides, but you just want to reset maybe one thing about it, you can always do that. And it's something that, I don't know, speeds things up, makes it all a little bit less stressful and easy to manage.
We did have a question. Miranda asked, making a change to a copy of an instance doesn't change the original instance. Is that right? I think I missed how you actually override. And just to add on to this, I'd love for you to showcase pushing overrides to a master in case you actually really like a change that you made. You think it should be the primary component.
Yeah, so good question. So let's actually start with a really simple example. So let's say I had I'll just call this like a circle component. So I created a circle, I did Command Option K just to really quickly make this a new primary component. And maybe just to illustrate this a little bit, I don't know, let's make this like orangey red. So now what I can do is if I duplicate this just by Option and dragging, or I could click on this and I could do Command D, and I now have a copy. Let's say I selected that background or that layer there and I want to change the fill. And let's say I change it to my favorite color, something like, I don't know, it's kind of a weird green, maybe something like that, right? I'm like, you know what, this color is perfect, that's working for me, I want to set that back to the original. So what I can do is with this, we can select this, and there's an option in here. So when you make a change to an instance, you can apply those changes from the instance back to the original primary component, as long as it's in the same file. You could imagine like if you're pulling a component from a library, you make a change, We don't want to always give everyone on the team the ability to just push a change back to original component, right? Especially when you're working with a really, really big team. But if you're working in a file and you just have a lot of maybe local components, or you're working with things just to make your kind of design process a little bit quicker, you'll always have the option to push those overrides back to the master. And when I click on this, that'll send it back. And now that's actually a part of our original primary component, which is pretty cool. So I use this a lot, like if I'm working with small little components in the file and I'm just making changes and I just want to send it back, it's a nice way to not have to copy that style, paste it back in the original, which is pretty cool.
Awesome.
Cool. Yeah, great question, Miranda.
I think, what do you think, Joey, about me tackling this field down here?
Yeah, let's do it. Do you want to share?
All right. Yeah, I'll give it a share.
All right.
Okay. All right. Okay. Great button. Very beautiful. Awesome.
Thank you.
One thing, we're going to go ahead and just create a field, and then we'll talk a little bit about how maybe we would create that field with auto layout. All right. So just kind of showing you some of the structure here, what I have. I've got a frame, and that frame has some styles. One thing you may not know or may know is that you can actually style frames a lot like you can style a rectangle. I can put a border radius on it. I can put effects on it. So just to kind of reduce clutter and using a lot of objects for this stuff, I've got this frame with a background color. I've got a shadow here, and I've got like a border style. This is actually linked to a color. And I've also got some other icons and stuff here. This here is a nested component that I actually just pulled from an icon library, so I didn't have to recreate it. And this is also another icon component. But right now, this is not a component at all. And as you see, it doesn't really respond or do anything like it should. What I want to create here is the idea of a field with a prepended and a appended icon area. You've probably seen fields like this that you can actually add icons to. For now, what I'm going to do to simplify this exercise is I'm just going to take this frame here. I'm going to go ahead and turn this into a component. We can always add stuff in to our master component later. I'm still trying to undo that word as well. All right. Looks like I have some rogue text here. I'm going to get that out. So here we go. We created a component. Let's see how it works. Well, right now, it doesn't seem to work so great, but that's because we haven't set our constraints of our children up in here. So I'm going to go ahead and put this text, let's say maybe 16 off the X there. That looks good. I'm going to center it vertically. This is great. And let's see how that responds now. All right, this responds pretty well. The next thing I'd like to do is add those icons in. You're going to see kind of an issue with the way that I've set this thing up as soon as I add them. So I'm going to drag this icon in here, and I'm going to say, oh, and this is how I used to design components before auto layout came out. So same thing here. I want this to be 16. I want it to be centered, and maybe I'll butt these two up against each other and use a nudge amount. My nudge amount is set to 8. Great. And often what I would do is I would actually use a manual width here and bring this over here. And then I would do what Joey said, set up my constraints to left and right, and then I'll just have this text be centered here. The other thing I'd like to check on is the fact that this icon, what are the constraints set on this? I'd like it to be set up to the left, doesn't need to be left and right, and I'd like to set it up to be centered. So let's resize this thing and see how it responds. Not bad. Notice everything's centered. As I move this frame, all of the children within it are responding according to their constraints. All right, now let's add in this other icon over here. And we're going to take it 16 off the right side and center it. We're also going to set its constraints to right and center for vertically. Let's see how this works here. Great. As you can see, as I resize this now, that this icon stays attached to that right side. So this is effectively the way that I used to design fields. So if I go ahead and Alt drag this to create an instance of that component, a lot of times what I would end up having to do is I would be like, oh, in this case, I don't want to have this icon. So I would just delete it out. Now, if you delete an object out of an instance, it just turns it off. It just turns off the display of it. But the problem here is that in this case, I really want the text to move over because now it doesn't have an icon. So what we need here is auto layout. So auto layout takes a little bit of time to figure out and master, but it's pretty easy to jump in. Let's just take this master component. And remember how Joey started with that master component? And he started messing with the structure of it. And then of course, all the instances updated. So we're gonna do the same thing here. We've got this instance kind of as a preview here. And I'm gonna try to make some changes to this. So I'm gonna go over here into auto layout and simply click plus. Apparently Figma's done a relatively good job at this. We've got this here. Looks like the icons all stayed where they were. Let's go. One thing that I noticed is that the spacing between these isn't enough. I wanted that 8 pixels between. So I'm going to select this again and see what that internal spacing is. If you hover here, you'll see a tooltip. It says spacing between items. I'm going to set that to 8 like I had before. And then it went ahead and figured out what all that internal spacing was here. This is what's really cool about auto layout is that I can actually ramp this up and now it'll lay out this thing and change the height based off the padding. This is a lot of the same way that setting up items in HTML and CSS work. The cool thing about it is that now if I turn the icon on, auto layout has this really interesting thing where when you actually turn the visibility of it off, it just collapses and it takes away that real estate. So this is a lot more like what I wanted to achieve. Okay, so that means in this case, if I just have a search field, I can delete this one here and it resizes the field. And then I go ahead and put in search here. And look, I have a lovely, lovely, lovely little search field. Okay, let's say I want to go ahead and add an icon on the right. Say I want like a search and go kind of a field. Let's go ahead and delete this one over here. And let's come back in and we'll turn this one on. Now we've got this go icon here. Notice that as soon as this icon is deleted, the height of this container actually changes. So I'm going to teach you a little something later on to help address that. But one thing that you can do is if you know that the height of this icon is 24, you can manually come in and set the text to height of 24. Oop, I've got to go to the master. And then I can set this text over here to centered, aligned in the middle. So now when I delete the icon, everything should stay the right height. So we're doing all right there. All right, so this is a case and an example of that right prepended icon. Now, let's just do another duplicate of this. What happens if maybe you want to add a different icon here? Because this icon over here, this arrow right is a nested component, this is where we can actually swap out those components. So going with Joey's first example, what we could do is just once this item is selected, we can come over here and drop it. And we can go through this menu and say, hey, I want this icon. Now, notice I'm using feather icons, and there's a lot of them, and this list is unmanageable and really hard to parse. You may run into a scenario like this. I actually didn't think it would be.
And we are so aware of this.
Right, we understand that this is an issue, but there is another way to work around this. So what I can do is I can come in and select the one that I want to swap out. I can go to assets. And Joey, I would love for you to share about slash naming and how you can actually use slash naming maybe in the future to help those instance menus be a little bit more tame. But for now, what we can do is we can actually go, we have in our assets here, we have these feather icons. Of course, we could just come through here and visually look at those icons, which is kind of nice. Maybe we want this arrow, or maybe we want this, who knows, this anchor thing. We could also search here. So say I really did want an anchor for whatever reason. I could go ahead and drag this in, and then by holding Shift and Command or Shift Control, I can actually swap it out. Now, I actually didn't have that thing selected, so, oh, Joey, what did I do?
I
lost
were you
control.
holding Option and Command?
Maybe I was not. Sorry about that. I have to do a bit of a claw here. I was holding the wrong buttons. I need to be holding Option and Command as I drag over that item. And you'll notice that it turns this nested component for the icon turns purple. And of course, if I let go, it swaps that out. I can still override over here if I want to make those colors a little different.
Actually, Rogie, something to point out there, like you were doing it, if you just hold Option, it'll replace the entire parent component. But if you hold Option Command, it'll allow you to place something or any nested instance inside, which is pretty cool.
So good point. So strictly holding Option here, I can only replace this item here, which is handy. But if I hold Option and Command, then I can go in and any of these nested components I can swap out.
Yeah.
Of course, a nested component. Great. Joey, I think that's good for me. What would you like to tackle next?
All right, I would love to get into, I'm a huge, I don't want to say this out loud. I'm a huge nerd for naming, so I can get into organization of components and actually making components when you have like something like an icon set. So maybe I can share a little bit of that.
I'll go for it.
All right, sweet. Cool. All right, let's go ahead and share. There we go. Awesome. All right, so what I've got here, just like Roger was using an icon set, I just dropped in a bunch of icons from the Streamline icon set, which is over at streamlineicons.com. Just want to plug them since I'm using them. But what often happens when you're working in Figma is, let's say you're either coming from Sketch or you have a bunch of drawn icons and you want to make them all icons to like publish and share with your team, right? So what might happen is you might, let me ungroup this here, just Command-Shift-G to ungroup. What you might do is you might select all of these and you're like, all right, I want to make all of these components so that everyone can use them. I'm going to right click, I'm going to choose create component. But actually what's happening here is you just have one big component, which is not really the point, right? That doesn't get us very far. So I'm going to undo that, and I want to show the ability to actually highlight all of the components or all of the elements that you want to, sorry, not components, but all of the elements that you want to make a component. And there's actually a little disclosure menu up here at the top, just next to the component icon. When you click this, you'll have the option to create a component, which is what we just did, made that big, large component, or you can actually create multiple components from everything that you have selected. This is super cool if you have lots of images or lots of icons that you're bringing in. And now just by clicking that, I have all of these icons over here that I can actually publish out as individual icons. And often too, when you're doing this, you might have a bunch of images or, like I said, random sets of icons, and the naming might not be perfect, right? So it looks like in this case, it's actually not too bad, but we have a lot of redundancy, right? Like if this were a file that were just full of icons, we might not want to always see arrows dash diagrams slash arrows slash what the icon is. So I'm actually going to rename these. And one trick to this is with all of these selected, you can always just right click and choose, where are we at? Rename or Command R. This will bring up a dialog, which actually allows you to batch rename. And there's a couple of regex things that you can do in here as well. But for example, what I want to do is I want to rename all of these to be, let's do icon slash, let's do icon slash, just to show you. It might not make a lot of sense now, but I'm going to do icon slash number down. This will give me a preview. I can stop descending at 1, or I can start the sequence from 1. And now when I rename, we can see that all of these are actually renamed. Let's go ahead. What did I do there? Let's do icon slash number down. There we go. We have 130 icons. We're starting at 1. I think I had an extra N in there. So that's pretty cool, right? And now you have all of these that you can actually share out. If you want, like, let's say I want to replace the word icon with something else. Well, I can actually just match or search for that. So let's say I want to replace the word icon with maybe streamline. Well, it'll give you a quick preview of what you're actually renaming to, which is super cool. So I can see it's going to be streamline slash 130 all the way down to 01. Click rename, and just like that, it's done. It's pretty cool. This is so helpful when you're doing a lot of batch renaming. For example, like one thing that I do a lot is I'll be making a component. It'll be for light mode. So it'll be like component slash light slash disclosure, right? And then I duplicate it and I want to make a dark mode variant. What I do is I'll just make the dark mode variants, and then I'll select all of them. I'll rename and I'll find the word light and I'll swap it for the word dark. And it's a really easy way just to kind of like get those out there and make that naming work for everyone. So speaking of naming, there's a couple of things that I want to call out here. Let's go ahead and I just create a new page for this, if it's okay. We can call this, let's just call it example for now. So when I create a component, let's actually go back to that mastering components page. And I'm just gonna grab this button for now. Let's go ahead and paste it in here. Gonna break it. Gonna break this as well, just so we have something to work with. So I'm gonna go ahead and I've got this button that's called button/primary. Gonna go ahead, right click and choose create component. Just like we were doing before, I can duplicate this. I can right click, I can detach this. I can double click. I can now call this button/secondary, and then I'll make a new component out of it. And what this is allowing me to do is I can grab a copy of it. Let's actually change the styling just so we can see what's going on here. So we'll make that white. We will make this blue. And again, what's going on here is because I'm naming this button slash and button slash, our instance swapping menu is picking that up. And that's going to give you the ability to swap really easily between. Actually, it's a little confusing right now because I have a couple of different copies. So I might do like button/white and then button/blue. And you'll see right away, this actually updates. Let's not do that. Let's go ahead and duplicate this. This actually updates and I can swap between white or blue. And I'm getting all of these options because it's button/, which is pretty cool. So you can start to kind of dictate like how you want designers to be able to find these components, what they should be able to swap these components with, and just make it a little bit easier for everyone. You can also actually sort everything by frames too. And what I mean by that is, let's say that we have a frame. I'm just going to draw a frame. So I just click the frame tool. I might make this a little bit darker so that we can all see it, maybe something like that. I'm going to rename this frame buttons. And one shortcut here is because I have a frame called buttons, I actually don't need to include the word button inside any of the components that are within that frame. And so with both of these, I could actually use that batch renaming that we just did. So I could do Command R, and I want to get rid of the button/. So I'm going to search for button/. Let's go ahead and rename. Just like that, we've got buttons. We have a white button and a blue button. And what's cool about this is because these are all central to this frame here, I can do exactly what I was doing before of making a copy and then instance swapping between blue and instance swapping between white, even though there's no slash before it, because they're all inside of that same frame. And then just to show you how this populates as well, when I go to the Assets tab, let's go, we're in example, we're in the page example. Now we're in example/buttons. This is created based on that frame, which is pretty cool. So you can imagine you have a design system file and perhaps you have a page that's icons, page that's buttons, or inside of buttons, you have a page that's like product A buttons, product B buttons with different frames for each. Like you can get really granular, and a lot of folks, when they're starting to use Figma, they don't realize that. And it just makes it a little bit easier to kind of organize your components from the start and allow one more example or one more way to kind of drill down into that naming convention, which is super cool. So yeah, this is my favorite way to kind of organize components. I also learned something really recently from another really talented designer, Jules Forrest over at Credit Karma. She's amazing. She like is almost single, well, she's had hope, but she's really like driven the initiative over there of building Credit Karma's design system. And yeah, I just love anything and everything she says and teaches all of us. So one thing that she suggested is when you're actually instance swapping, like let's say I make another component over here. I'm gonna just duplicate this and I'm gonna make another component. I'll rename this, let's just call this outline. And with this one, I'm gonna add a stroke. I want that stroke to be our color and bump it up one. And let's go ahead and remove the fill. So we've got kind of like a ghost or an outline button like this. So what usually happens is you'll have a button here, and let's imagine you have a ton of different examples. You click the instance swapping menu. Because these are in alphabetical order, it doesn't always make the most sense to see them in alphabetical order, and we don't have that option available yet in Figma. But if you're creating components and you want users to be able to swap really easily and kind of predictably between different components, like let's say after primary, let's say after blue always comes white, and then after white always comes outline. Well, you can start to actually prescribe that a little bit just by clicking on the component and actually including a number before it. So you could do like 01 blue. And then for white, we could do 02, whoops, let's do 02-white. And then finally, 03-outline. And I know this may seem simple, just putting a button in front of the component, but check this out. Now I can actually click on our instance here, and these are all in the exact order that we want. And it's easy to read, and you can really prescribe from the start how you want everyone to be able to kind of interpret these components. And when you have dozens and dozens of different instances that you can swap to, I found this to be really, really helpful. Let's see, I saw a question from Michaela. How did you add the border style to those components? Is that different from a stroke? Good question. Let's see, so what I did is, just to show you, I'll hold Option, drag this out. Just gonna detach this for now so we have something to work with. And then I can click this. Let's click our background rectangle there. All I did was I added a stroke here just by clicking the plus. And then all of our color styles are going to be there for either our fills or our strokes. So we can use those colors for each. They're not kind of independent, if you will. So all I did there was I chose our primary color again. I bumped this up to 2, and now I've got a stroke there. We've just kind of, as a team, as far as the product goes, we've really determined that, like, when you're using those colors, you often want to use them for both, and having kind of duplicates for each might be a little bit much for most teams. So that's kind of how it works in Figma. Cool.
Got another, I have a couple
yeah.
of questions for you.
Yeah.
One, I would love for you to, you've shown how to use a frame to help organize this naming convention and not create really long names. Can you also show how to use the page as well to showcase another way of organizing, or another layer, or like a folder structure for those components? As well as, somebody's asked, how can I change icons inside component instances? So I think I just showcased that, but if you'd like to show it, go ahead.
Yeah, let's go back. Maybe I'll tackle that question first. So what we did there was we had this icon here. Let's go to where that's located. I'll grab this. Cool. So all I did, or all Rogie did when he showed that, was he selected this, and he actually went to the assets panel, I think, and then he chose icons. He went into Streamline. Or actually, this is my set, sorry, but I'll go into Streamline. And what you can do is, if I want to swap this arrow out for another instance that's available, I can simply just hold Option and Command. I can grab an icon that we want. Like, let's say we want to swap that arrow for actually this one instead. Well, I can grab this, and then holding Option and Command, I can drag this right inside and replace that icon in place. I could also, if I want, I can select this, and I can go to the menu over here and select between. But as we were kind of talking about earlier, for a lot of cases, it's almost just easier to use that assets panel. That way you can visually see everything. You can hold Option and Command and drag that right in. Now that I've got this, I can, of course, change that color of that to be anything else, and work with it pretty easily there.
Awesome.
Yeah, so I can show pages next. Just to start, pages I think are really helpful in so many ways. There's no real limit to how many pages you can create in Figma. And actually, something that's not super well known is, let's say you have an app and you're working on a feature, and you want to maybe have different prototypes for different users to maybe study their interactions. Well, you can create different pages for those different users and share individual prototypes based on the page. So you can have all of your designs in one file, all of your variants in different pages, and you can share individual prototypes, which will guarantee that participant A doesn't see participant B's design, and vice versa. And it's just something that I think makes it really cool, and prevents so many extra files from actually having to be created. So in terms of components, you can use pages to also organize, as well as frames. What I did here is, let's call this buttons. So let's imagine we're working in a design system file here. Maybe it's our global design system file, where we have things like our colors and our buttons and kind of core primary elements like that. So I've got a page here called buttons. I could just as easily create a page, and maybe I call this, what should we call this, Rogie? I could call this like avatars, or profile photos, something like that. And actually, we can use a plugin just to generate a couple of profiles here. So Command D just to repeat that last action. I think I have it installed. I'm going to right click and go to plugins, and then go to Content Reel, which is a plugin by Microsoft. And what I can do now, I haven't used it since the update. Let's go ahead and click continue. So what I can do now is I can go to our avatars. Let's go ahead and apply these. Or, oh, I can actually, that's cool. I can select individual ones. So let's do, I haven't used this yet. Let's do that. Oh, I have to sign in. No. I think, right? Am I doing that correct?
I think so. I've used this plugin before.
Yeah, I know they just updated it, so I might not, I may have to sign in. That's no problem. Let's go ahead and I think we had an avatar over here. I'm just going to copy. Oh, cool. We have a bunch. So I'm just going
Yeah.
to copy, go back to our profile photo, going to paste this in over here. It looks like there's a bunch of different fills associated with this image here. So what I'm actually going to do is Command Option C to copy the style. And then I'm going to click on each one of these and Command Option V to paste the style. And now I can actually select one of these. I can just remove that top image, go here, remove those two, go here, remove those three. I'll just do the same thing just to show. One more, and let's do one more. There we go. He looks kind of mean. So now what we can do is if I want to create these as different components, all I have to do is select all of these, go back to the menu at the top, choose create multiple components. I've got this. I could batch rename. I could say profile slash, and then we could do number down. Perfect. So we've got profile 01 through 05. And now just to show you again, like let's say I grab this and I go back to mastering components and I want to insert an asset. Let's collapse this. You can actually see, because we're using pages, there's a new top level page here that's called profile photos with our components inside based on how they're named. So it's just, when you use pages, when you use frames, it's just another level up, which gives you that kind of additional way to organize everything, which is pretty cool. So in a small design system, it might not be the most practical, but when you're in a design system and you're in a file that has hundreds, if not thousands of components in total, this is a really helpful way to just ensure that everyone is able to see and find components really easily. Actually, there's one thing I did want to mention, if it's okay, Rogie, then I'll turn it back to you for a little bit, is our component descriptions. So this might not be obvious, but one thing you can actually do is we've got this blue button over here, and there's actually a field on the right-hand side called component description. And what you can do over here is you can actually type in, let's say this is our primary button in the design system. Well, I can type in primary button. And what's cool about that is if I go to the assets tab, I can search for blue, which will populate that button. Or I could actually search for primary, which will also populate that button because of that description. So if you had keywords, if you had like JIRA ticket numbers, if you had any sort of tags that would help anyone find components easier, you can always put those in. I personally just separate by comma. It's a free text field, so really anything goes there as far as how you want things to be created. All of that's available there. And now I can actually just grab this, drag it right in, and I'm working with it. And the last thing that I wanted to add, just because we were talking about styles was, descriptions, is styles. You can actually always right click on a style, choose to edit that style, and you'll actually be able to add a style description too. So I could say, maybe this is our primary brand. I could save that, back out. And now, whenever I have a shape or an object and I go to actually select a color, if I hover over it, you'll see the style name as well as that style description just below. And something that's kind of cool is maybe you put your color accessibility standards in there, maybe describing if it's AA or AAA compliant. Perhaps you show the hex color underneath just to make it a little bit easier. All sorts of things just to help people kind of understand the design system and what they're looking at a little bit more.
Awesome. Well, I've got a couple of, we are coming to about, I would say we probably have about 15 to 20 minutes.
Cool.
I have a couple of examples I think that I can just blaze through super fast, just to kind of pack some knowledge in here. And then we can switch back to some of these complex components and talk about that. So I'll hop in.
That sounds good.
All right. Okay. So we're going to go with like a speed run on this. Thank you all for your great questions. I always have to remember that like we always have so many questions here, and so we need to get to those as well. All right. So let's just talk about throwing together a few components and how I might think about that. Right now, I'd like to talk about this avatar component. Right now, it's actually not a component. It's just a frame. I'm not even sure if constraints are set up in any way, but just to look at the structure of this, it is an image. That image has a ton of fills on it. You could also just have separate layers, and they could have names like, you know, Sandra or whatever, and you could have different images there. You could also just have one image and always replace the fills in the overrides as well. I like setting them up like this because I like having a bunch of, I don't know, like fake data, so that I can just showcase what a screen might look like with a bunch of different images in it. as well as like, what if they don't have an avatar? What if they don't have an image? So I've actually done this. If you turn off the image here, you can actually see that I set up the initials RK. It's a little text box. I've actually taken this text box and I have stretched it out to the 4 corners, as well as set a line middle. I'm also going to set up my constraints like Joey with my newfangled little key combo. I'm holding shift and boom, look at me. All right, so now this text should stay constrained to the 4 corners. I could obviously just set it at center as well, but I like doing it this way. So now let's go ahead and see that we have this image as well here, so we can turn off or on an image if we need it. You never know what you might have in these components. Maybe an avatar component isn't just strictly an avatar. It's actually got like a status indicator on it. Maybe you've got some kind of a number over here. Who knows? So you might actually pack those things in there and just turn this off. This isn't the way I necessarily recommend doing it, but it can work. So let's go ahead and just turn that into a component right there by clicking the button. And now we have this avatar instance that we can take anywhere with us. Let's take a few of these and duplicate them out. And I can turn on a status number like this. Let's see how this thing responds. We can see that we have some issues with this whole thing. One is that the border radius actually isn't responding. Once I get big enough with this avatar, we kind of have an issue there. And maybe I don't want this little circle to, maybe I don't want it to be that, that big. So I can actually come into this master component here. And if I'd like, I can actually tell the status, hey, I'd like you to be on the right and bottom. And as soon as I do that, you can see that it didn't actually grow anymore. It didn't scale. And maybe also, I'd like to do the same thing with the number. I'd like that to be on the right and the top. Let's preview what that may look like here. Okay, status, let's do the number there. Okay, great, that's working. Now we have one more problem, which is this. Like, what happens to this background? And the reason for this is that this background has been set to 24 pixel border radius. A couple of ways that we could take care of this. One is that we could just ramp that sucker way up and just put it at a really high number, and then it should always work for most examples and most sizes. The other thing we could do is maybe drop a circle back under here and take that background fill off that main frame. Doesn't matter, looks like it's working pretty well right here. So now we have an avatar component that we can swap out. Let's say we wanted to have different versions. Let's treat this avatar like it's our base structure. So let's go ahead and turn off. So this is like avatar default. I'm gonna go ahead and do this, avatar default. All right, we're gonna just delete these really quick. And what if we just wanted to have some handy little components laying around so that we can actually swap these out quickly so we don't have to always go in, click in here and do this. So maybe we've got one with the status and we want a photo in there. So we can actually take this just in Joey's technique. We can do a wrapper for that or just turn it into a component, boom. And maybe we're gonna call this avatar, who knows, like status or with status or something.
Who knows?
Image with status. I don't know. We're developing a fake design system here. So anyways, we can now have these things. So if we have an instance here, we're working with this and you're like, oh, in this case, we're logged in. They've already uploaded their image and maybe they're active and online. You want to go ahead and swap that instance out. You could just do this right here in this menu. Oh, swap it out for the image with status. Boom. It's still using that base avatar master as the underlying structure. What if you wanted to have another one and you wanted to override? You could have hold Command or Control click. That actually brings me right down to the image here. And then of course I could say, yeah, I wanna, yeah, who knows? I want this one. Yeah, cool. All right, so there's a little bit about avatars and setting up an avatar component there. I'm gonna go, Joey, you're the checkbox master, so I'm gonna skip on by that. And I'm just gonna talk really quickly about how to set up some like utility components. Let's just say that I want to create a card and I want to put this media component, and right now it's not a component, but this media into the card because maybe there's something more than just an image. Maybe for me, and I did this at Dribble a lot, I've done this in my own personal designs, a media component may have like things like this ability to darken an image. You want to have an overlay, maybe you want to have some text over it or something like that. So it's not simply an image. So this is what we've created here is a frame with an image with these like darkened layers over it. I'm going to turn that into a media component. And then I'm going to go ahead and use that. And let's once again see how it responds. All right, seems like it's working pretty well. All right, so now we're going to have this card component that will have a nested media component in it. So this is 320. Let's just say we want this to be, I'm going to turn and lock my constraints here, 320. And I'm going to just bump this off a few. So maybe it's like that. All right, I'm just going to put this into this frame. And I am going to, I want it to be a little bigger. All right. All right, and then I'm going to do this. Let's bring my text down here. Now, let's just say, this is going to be a little bit of a rudimentary example, but let's just say we're like, this is glorious. I love this component. Look at it. I'm going to go ahead and create it into be this primary component. But let's say I want to go ahead and add some text into here. Oh, yeah, well, this should have more text. Ah, we've got a problem here. What happens if I'd like to resize this and scale it? Oh, we've got a problem here. You may be bumping into this kind of stuff. Well, not to worry here. What we can do, of course, is set this constraints to the left and right and the top. We can also set this to the top or something like that. We can start to see how that might actually work, but it still is a bit unpredictable. This is where I would really advise using auto layout with this whole thing. So let's just take this card and let's just turn on auto layout. As you can see, it actually like did a lot better job of aligning than I did.
Always the best.
I know, I love it when it's just like auto layout roulette. Like it worked great. Okay, so I'm gonna put my vertical padding here. And in case you didn't know that you can actually scrub these fields, which is pretty fun. So I'm gonna put that, I'm gonna put my horizontal padding at 16. I'm gonna delete this instance for a second. I'm gonna see if my spacing between items, that should be 16 as well, because I love those 8s. Now, let's see how this works. Let's create an instance of this, and I'm just gonna copy paste this text. Oh, not exactly how I had hoped. What's wrong here? Let's see. It looks like this text is set to like a fixed width right now. One thing that we can do is that we can actually go and change this. It's actually an automatic width. We could set it to a fixed size or auto height, which would actually work for us. Or we can also, this is a fun little one that I love talking about. We can stretch left and right. And because it's a child of a vertical auto layout container here, it enables this ability to automatically stretch things to the left and right. So notice how this magically fixed our component, and now it's all wonderful, and the container resizes. Awesome. Joey, what you got?
That was a really quick speed run. Nice job. I just want to say it's probably likely that we're moving a little bit faster, and that's definitely why we record these. I know there's a lot to keep up with, but hopefully over time, we can slow down and all level up. I want to share that it's being recorded, and a lot of this, yeah, we're always happy to take questions as well. I know, just speaking from experience, I know I fly through things, so I just wanted to just say sorry in advance. This is awesome, Rogie. Thanks for demoing that. Maybe I can share really quickly like how I typically treat like checkboxes, and then we can get into perhaps like a little complex auto layout. And actually, just before that, I would just want to call out on the card that you made. This is what's so cool about auto layout. Like you're creating a complex component like this, you're sharing it with your team, and then if someone's using this and they don't want that image, all they have to do is hide the image. Or if they don't want the text, all they have to do is hide the text. And it just makes for these really dynamic, awesome components that you can build that can be really powerful from the start. And I don't know, I love that. I think it's super cool for those who are creating components. All right, I can take back control and show a couple of things with check marks. Who would have thought we'd be talking about check marks?
Who better? I chose this for you because you were made for this.
Gosh, that is embarrassing. All right. So when I create check marks, well, just a quick example. So there's something that I'll typically do where, let's say I have this little check icon, and maybe for this one, I'll bump it up here, and I might create a component out of this just in case I ever, let's say I ever change what that icon is. I just want it to be reflected in all of the check marks that I make. So I might title this like icon/checkmark. I can now grab this, I'll just copy it, and then in my checkbox over here that I've named checkbox unchecked, What I'll do is I'll delete that original check mark. I'll paste in our new component, and now we've got our checkmark component inside of our checkbox. It's a lot of checks. With this, all I'm going to do is I'm going to create a component. And just for now, I'm actually going to delete this one. I want to show how these two are kind of related. So I've got this checkbox unchecked. I'm going to hide the checkbox inside. I'm now going to duplicate this, just Command D, drag out our new copy over here, going to right click, create a new component, double click here, change unchecked to checked. And now inside of that, I'm going to drill down a little bit and turn on that icon. So now I've got these two components that are composed of each other, or where one is composed of the original, and I've got the icon inside. And what's really cool about this, of course, is I can grab a copy of this. I can instant swap over here between unchecked and checked really easily. But let's say I ever change the style of this. Like let's say I actually don't want that inner shadow. Well, I only have to remove it from the original there. So I'll just hide it here, and it's going to be reflected and hidden everywhere else. Let's say I want to change that border from a gray to a blue. Again, just have to do that once. And it's kind of just about like, I love trying to find ways of working efficiently with components, and this is one of those ways. Compose from existing components where you can. Yeah, so let's see. I saw a quick question, benefits of having the check icon in the original instead of simply only using it in the check component. I think really just that, like just being able to compose a new component from the other one is all. And being able to, you know, if I want to make a change over here, it's always applicable everywhere else. If I ever want to like modify that original checkbox or checkmark, again, I can just do it in one spot and it's applicable everywhere. Like let's say I turn this on and I decide, you know what, for all checkmarks, I actually just want to change that to blue. I'm going to hide that now. So again, I only did that once, but all instances of our checkbox checked, totally good. And this might be a little bit overkill for this simple example, but when you're thinking in terms of like larger, more complex components, I think this really comes in handy. Especially things like what Rogie was just demoing, where you have all of these things that are kind of built on top of each other. It can come in handy. Yes, design token, like for sure.
Yep.
I think that's where we're all kind of getting and heading. So, all right, checkboxes. Hopefully that's helpful. Again, you don't have to do it this complex, but I think it's fun to try to think of little shortcuts like that. All right, I want to go over here, and I thought it might be fun to show a quick little example of building like a complex auto layout example. I'm a little nervous. Rogie, maybe you can help me through this.
Yeah, I often get nervous when approaching these as well.
I just pretend. Let's just pretend no one's on the stream. Yeah. All right.
Great.
Thanks.
Great.
So what I've got here is I've got this auto layout container that is resizable. And it looks like it's actually pretty good in this example. Our text is resizing. It looks like it's an entire auto layout container with a couple of auto layout instances inside. So let's just do it. Let's recreate this. All right, so what I want to do is I'm going to grab a frame, and it doesn't have to be exact, but I'm going to draw it roughly to match the original frame over here. I'm going to click or tap I on my keyboard to grab the fill or the color picker tool. Select that black there. We've got our frame just like that. I'm going to pull from this a little bit, just copy and pasting some elements out. So I want to grab this heading large over here. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to our new frame. I'm going to paste it in. It's okay. Doesn't have to be exact. I'm going to rename our new frame. We'll call this AL example. All right. So what I want to do now that I'm kind of working with this is I want to make this an actual auto layout container, just like we were doing before. So it's definitely not perfect right now, but let's go ahead and add auto layout. So a shortcut, I'm not sure if you mentioned this, Rogie, but you can always do Shift-A to apply auto layout. So it does the same effect as clicking the plus over here. So I'll do Shift-A. Just like that, we've got an auto layout container. So not perfect yet. Let's bump this up to, let's maybe do 32. And then let's click on this again. We'll change our top and bottom to 32. And then perhaps the space between items, it looks like that might be like 16 or so. Looks a little big. Let's do 24. All right, so we've got this. And just to test it out, what I typically like to do when I'm kind of creating new components or new UI is I like to just, as I get started, I like to create a new component from this. And I like to drag out an instance. And in the instance, I like to try to break the instance or try to like stretch it and change it and just see like, how is this gonna work for a designer who's actually using this component, right? So I've got this and it's like, this clearly isn't working as we had expected, right? So what I can do is I can work back in that original example and I can see how any changes will be applied to any instances. So let's click on that text here. And the reason that this isn't stretching across is because at the top, it's been selected to align to the center, but we want to stretch it to the left and to the right. So I'm actually just going to select this option. And now what's cool is as I grab this, as I shrink it, that is working as we expected. I could even go here, I could copy this text, I could paste it a bunch of times just to double check that, again, this instance is working as expected. And then if you remember before, let's get it back to normal. All I have to do is right click, reset the instance, and we're good. And that's pretty awesome. All right, so let's go ahead and work with this group down here. For this one, I'm actually just going to keep things simple, and I want to just copy the different layers in here. So we've got a couple of text layers and a resolve group. Just going to copy that. Let's go in our auto layout example, and I'm just going to paste that in. That clearly doesn't look right, so we're going to fix this. So what we need here is we actually need another auto layout group inside of our original auto layout container. So what I want to do is I want to stack all of these horizontally. So I'm going to actually just create a new auto layout group. I could create a frame and then create a group or an auto layout group, but I could actually just hit Shift A at the moment, and that'll automatically create an auto layout frame for us to work with. So what's really cool about this now is these are stacked vertically, but I actually want to change these to be horizontally. Let's go ahead and make it horizontal. And just like that, we're like at a pretty good spot. We even have a 16 gap between. So what that means is as I click on these different items and hold Option, we can verify that between these items is 16. If I click on this outer frame, we can see the top is also 16 because on the outermost frame, again, we've got that 16 spacing that's been set. And then again, just to double check, like this is kind of what I do. It's like work and check and work and check. Let's go over here. Let's take our original. Let's stretch it a little bit. And it actually looks like that's working pretty well, except this group down here, but I'll come back to that. So let's go ahead. I'm going to keep going. I just want to grab this group down here. We can grab this. Let's go ahead and grab this video clip content. I think for now, I'm just going to copy this and paste it in. Just it's a pretty simple one, really comparable to this that we just built. So I'll click on our auto layout group. Let's paste this in. And just in case you weren't familiar with this, let's say we wanted to put this actually below this header text here. What you can actually do is with this selected, you can actually use the arrows over here on the right-hand side to move this either up or down the layer list. So on my keyboard, I could do the Option Command, hold Option Command and arrow key, or if you want to use the UI, you can always really easily just swap the positions over here to move that. So let's maybe say in my example, I want to put this text, this play button actually above. I think that makes a little bit more sense. And then finally, let's grab this text here. So we've got our content text. Let's go back to our auto layout example. Let's paste this in. Again, 16, perfect. I love when all of these things match up perfectly. It's like the best. And I think we're actually at a pretty good spot now. Like if I grab this and I stretch it or shrink it, how's that look, Rogie? I could actually copy this, I could paste this a couple times.
I think it's really good. And actually this specific example was from a friend of mine that works for Pluralsight. And he was trying to say, like, how can I create a component that I can just resize and scale for responsive for mobile? And so this was our attempt. Auto Layout 2 isn't, and that's what our current version is, it isn't perfect, but we can achieve a lot of these different things. We're really looking forward to when the next version of that is coming out. I did have one question, and I think I saw it in the chat earlier.
Yeah.
So do you know how to achieve an auto layout with a fixed icon on the left, never change size? So think of it like this React's basic concept with the play button, fixed icon on the left, but the whole container can variably change. Yeah. Is there a way
I see.
that you would approach that?
Let's give that a try. I can't guarantee you. Let's give it a try.
I'm putting you on the spot.
No, it's good. This is how I keep my job. All right, so what I can do is let's click the frame tool, and I'm just gonna draw or make a new thing up here. Again, let's grab our color picker tool. Let's grab our black there. Just for now, I'm gonna copy this text, let's paste it in here. I might, let's go ahead and apply auto layout. So Shift A again, and it's a little tight. So let's do 24, 24, and let's keep this at 16. And I'm gonna create another component out of this, and we'll just call this test run. So now, just to double check, I've got, let's make a copy of it. Let's add some more text there, just to see how it grows or shrinks. So it looks like we're actually heading in the wrong direction here, where we want to go left to right, not top to bottom. So I'm going to select this, and instead of horizontal, I want to change this to vertical, which will give us this, this exact kind of scenario that we're looking for. And let's say that I want, to grab maybe this frame icon or this play icon down here, this play circle, and I want to paste it in here. So what we've got now is we've got these two things stacked, and as I add text in here, let's go and copy this and paste this. It's actually pushing that downward. But let's say that I want this play icon to be maybe at the top left. Is that kind of what you're getting at, Rogie?
Yeah, it could be centered, it could be top left, but the basic idea being that this text, the auto layout, of course, can move vertically, but that that icon isn't changing size. It's not expanding or warping.
Yeah. All right, so what I would do there is, this is an example of where I would create another auto layout container within an auto layout container. And here's the reason. If I select this play icon and I select this text here and I do Shift A again, we now have an auto layout container, but we want to change this actually instead of vertical to be horizontal. And it looks like now we've got these two stacked side by side, which is great. And we can actually copy and paste this text a couple of times, but it looks like, again, our icon's on the wrong side, and it looks like it's staying center with the container, not staying at the top. So what I want to do is I actually want to grab this text here, and I want to change the position of these. So I'm going to select that play circle, and then using the keyboard shortcut again, Command Option down arrow, I'm going to place it to the left. And now I actually want to change it from the center to the top. So I'm going to pin this to the top, so it's always aligned to the top, no matter how the text changed or no matter how much text is added or how the container is actually added. So we'll align this to the top. And I think, let's go ahead and click this container. Let's go ahead and set this to grow. I think we're kind of there, right? Where we've got this, but I know that, all right, Rogie, I know this is where I run into that, that issue, right?
Yeah,
This
is a difficult one.
Let's do this. I'm actually just undo that. Let's go back here. All right, so I just want to, we're almost there. We've got this text here. I could get rid of this. It's going to grow or shrink kind of as necessary. Let's go ahead and just reset the general instance so that we've got it. And we can paste some text in here. So what are we missing now? Is it as I stretch the container?
Yeah, and it may not be very possible or easily possible.
Yeah.
But the idea being that we want to fix width icon that's always kind of hanging out there at the top, and then we want that text we want this thing to be able to auto layout vertically, but we also want to be able to stretch that container horizontally.
Yeah. I think, all right, now I'm just going to do this live. Let's see. So what I might actually do there is I might create, I'm just going to give this a try. I might create another frame, place this container inside of that frame, put auto layout on that frame, and then have the child element stretch left and right. And now maybe as I size this, no, I don't think I can do it that way. Yeah, dang it. I think that might be a current limitation in terms of like as far as you can get with the responsiveness.
All right, let's do a little tag team. Tap, I'm coming in. Now, I don't know how to do this, but I have an idea.
Let's try it.
So I'm going to
follow you.
And I'm going to make an attempt using negative frame spacing. If it doesn't work, I'd still like to give an example of that, but this felt like it might be ripe for that. Okay, so let's just get the icon out of there for now. All right, is this, I'm in the instance, look at me. All right, so we've got this. We've got an auto layout. This is set up vertically. And okay, that's great. I don't think we need this frame for now. I'm just going to ungroup that frame. I'm going to go to this stretch idea here. So once again, we've got a vertical, this component is vertical auto layout. And then the child, this text object is.
Rogie, could I have you share your screen just so we can see the controls? I'm observing you, but I just want to make sure that we can see. Cool.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's just go back really quick to where we're at here. Pretty simple. We've got this component, took out the icon, and what we've got now is a vertical auto layout on this component. The child, the only child here, it's probably a spoiled child since it's the only child. That was a joke. This text objects I have set to stretch here. So I think without the icon, this works, I think. Okay, so I'm just gonna take this text, put in a couple of lines. Great, it grows that way. Now we have this resize ability here. This resize horizontal becomes available when you have a vertical auto layout container. Great, now I just need the icon on the left here. So let's take this play circle and let's just drop it in. Unfortunately, because it is a vertical auto layout container, this icon stacks in vertically. Enter. This is going to be a really cool time to share about this negative frame thing. So we're going to have to do a little bit of hackery on this, but let's just make this big enough so this icon is, you know, sizable for the text. All right, so what I would do here, since this is in a frame, you can actually, if I hold Command or Control while I change the frame, I can actually change the frame without moving the objects, and it basically does not honor the constraints of the objects underneath. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and set this thing. Let's just set it to 1 for now. Oop, that's not what I meant to do. We're just going to move it down to 1 here. So this is a way that you can actually have something occupy the real estate of an auto layout contained item, but actually not occupy, it actually displays, but doesn't occupy any real estate. All right, so in this same way, I could actually take this play circle and drag it over here. So if I hold space while I drag, or first start dragging, then hold space, it'll still stay in the frame. So I could actually drag it all the way over here. And this is exactly what I mean by like a negative frame spacing, because it's actually positioned negatively within the frame. The frame's occupied up here, but actually the item is way over here. And if I turned on clip, unfortunately, you would never see it. So make sure if you're ever doing anything like this, you unclip this. And then of course, this isn't that lovely and beautiful, but we can actually put some more spacing in here to create room for that if we'd like, and go at it from that approach. Now, I don't think that this is a perfect solution. I've used this quite a few times, this technique, this negative frame thing, when I'm trying to work on like complex things that I want in an auto layout. But I think at least it's a tool in your belt until auto layout 3 comes out for you to be able to do something like this. If I go all the way back to the dialogue example here that we never got to create, I've ran into issues like that. Like what if I wanted to have the X button? I did have a design for a long time that I was working on that had a close button. It was kind of offset here, and auto layout wasn't allowing me to do that. I'd hit align right, and I think we could give that a quick example here. If I turn on auto layout, let's go vertical on this. All right, what do we got in here? Trying to figure out what's actually in here. Let's bring this into it. Notice we've got this issue. Now, if I said, oh, wait, I just want to align this to the right. Let's see what we got here. What did we set here? Oh, okay, we've got vertical, and we should have, oh, it used a ton of padding. I was wondering what's going on. I was like, there's so much padding there. It automatically sensed that I had a ton of padding in there. So let's say this is our dialog box here, and I wanted this X on the upper right area, but say I wanted more padding here, according to my auto layout container, I wanted 32 pixels. This would be another good example of how you could locate this up further, but still keep it in auto layout. So once again, I can hit Command Shift G, sorry, Command Option. What am I doing? I do not know what I'm doing. I think I've lost my mind, Joe.
What's up?
Oh, my goodness. Okay, I just needed to hit Command Shift F to frame this. I need that frame to be able, I feel like my brain is definitely taking a dive. I'm gonna
okay, you're doing
drag
great.
again. You're doing great, man. So I can go ahead and put this in the upper corner. And of course, this is actually the frame for it. And I can hold Command while I resize this to basically make it take up nothing. So you can actually still turn this thing off and on. I'm going to drag this into the right location that I'd like to. This way we can still have quite a lot of padding, but we can have this in the upper right corner. We can also reduce spacing to 0 here. There are reasons that you can use this technique. I think that's it for me sharing. I think we're kind of running to time. Joe, do you think we have time for any more questions or any more questions at all?
I got a couple minutes.
All right,
Also,
let's see
yeah,
what.
if you ever want to like reach us, like we're on Twitter, happy to answer or like dive into any examples you have as much as we can. It's definitely fun to like share all of this with everyone.
Absolutely. Thanks for all your questions too. If you've got any questions, let us know. We can try to answer here.
This is really
we
fun.
are hearing, I do see a lot too. I don't know if you noticed this, Joey, a lot of people talking about independent margins and paddings on auto layout, and we're listening, we're hearing you. The Figma team absolutely is aware that that's a limitation, and we need to get better about that one. So we're gonna go ahead and just take these examples. They may be a little bit messy, but we're gonna publish them right to the community. That way you can come in here. There's some other great examples that we never got through. Just some really interesting layout things, layout ideas here. I also have a really fun one here with a complex button where you can actually, it's really wild, but you can basically use Boolean groups and set constraints on them. That's cool. This is very hard to pull off, but you can actually use auto layout spacing to pull off progress bars like this. Especially even in their instances, which isn't very easy to do in Figma. So we'll publish this for you all. Get in there, dig around, have fun, and please talk to us on Twitter or email or whatever you'd like to. Joey, will you drop your Twitter account here?
Oh, sure. What is my Twitter? Joey A. Banks. That was awesome. Thanks everyone for hanging out. It was fun to just jam with everyone. And Rogie, thanks for putting this all together.
Dude, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Appreciate you all. We will be doing another stream. We'll actually be doing 2 more streams next week. So just hit up figma.com/events to register for those. Thanks so much.
Awesome. Talk to you all soon.
All right. See you later.